Okay, everybody, we're going to get started so that we are respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Amanda Vitello, and I work with the Pre-AP program here at the College Board. I'm going to be one of your facilitators today. We also have Zach Homer here with us, who's going to lead us through the bulk of the session today. Before we get started, I do want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and we will send out a link to the recording of this webinar within about 48 hours from the recording. Then we will process that recording, and it will ultimately live in Pre-AP Classroom under the professional learning section. And you'll learn where that is through the session today. So first off, thank you so much, everybody, for participating in our poll. I'm going to go ahead and share the results with everybody. It looks like we've got a lot of first-year teachers, and what a year to start a new program. We are just grateful that you are willing to give this a go, and I think the resources that you'll see in Pre-AP Classroom will help you as you're planning for this really unusual year that we're all beginning. So what I'd like to do now, just to kick us off, is orient everybody to the Zoom webinar functionality. As we go through the session, if you have questions about functionality or content or pedagogy, which this session is not really focused on content and pedagogy. We've had previous webinars that have talked quite a bit about those topics. This webinar is really focused on the functionality and features of Pre-AP Classroom. That said, if you have a question, pop it in. We'll either do our best to answer it, or we will go ahead and gather your email address and follow up with you. If you have any reflections or feedback on what you're seeing, please go ahead and drop those into the chat. And depending on the nature of your comment, you can choose either all panelists, and then Zach and I will see that comment, or you can choose all panelists and attendees if you think that it's something that everybody would benefit from. You also do have the option next to your name to go ahead and raise your hand. If you do that, I'll reach out via private chat and just see if there's something that I can help you with. And finally, participating polls, which you've already done. So thank you very much for that. So now let's dive in. Today we are going to learn a little bit about course audit, which is the process that gets you access to Pre-AP Classroom. We then are going to have Zach really walk us through the very basics, from logging in, creating your sections, having the join codes for students, what it looks like for students to create their accounts, walking through the Pre-AP Classroom functionality, and then we will have some time set aside at the end to ask questions, but again, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A section at any time. And the reason we do ask you to put it in the Q&A section as opposed to the chat is because it'll allow us to keep your question and the response tied together. A lot of times questions asked in the chat, the responses get lost because there's other comments in between. So let's talk a little bit about course audit. Now, if some of you are AP teachers, you're familiar with course audit, but Pre-AP course audit does have some differences, and we'll talk through that. So what is Pre-AP course audit? Really the purpose is so that you know what's required as part of a Pre-AP course designation. And it lets colleges and universities know that all courses that are designated College Board Pre-AP meet the same criteria. And it's important to know about the course audit process because that's how you as teachers gain access to Pre-AP Classroom. So what is the course designation and the course audit requirements? Generally, the process is modeled on AP Classroom and the AP AP course audit process. There are some differences though. So if you are an AP teacher, then you know that you have to submit a syllabus. With Pre-AP, there is no syllabus submission. The process is, and I'll walk you through how to get there, is really that you select the course that you're teaching, And then you read through and agree to the course requirements. And there are 4 primary course requirements with course audit. One is that the pre-AP course is the foundation for all sections of the course at the school. So that means any student taking Algebra 1 is taking the pre-AP Algebra 1 course. There are some, deferments that can be granted if it will take some time for folks to have that, to meet that requirement. Teachers also need to agree that they will align their classroom instruction to the course frameworks. Teachers have to agree that they will administer at least one of the 2 learning checkpoints provided per unit and will administer all 4 performance tasks. And then finally, teachers and at least 1 administrator per site need to complete the pre-AP foundational learning modules. Now, we say in person, that was pre-COVID. Now all of the modules are available online. Teachers also do need to complete at least 1 scoring module, which walks you through how to score those performance tasks. So what is the process? There are 3 distinct roles that have a role in the course audit process. The first is your pre-AP coordinator, and that's somebody at your school site who is really the primary liaison between the College Board and your school site as it relates to pre-AP. You should ask around and find out who at your school site is your pre-AP coordinator. That person has received an email from the College Board with a code that they then need to pass on to their course audit administrator. The course audit administrator is also someone who's located at your school site who really has the authority to agree to the terms of the course audit process and the requirements of pre-AP. That person needs to agree that yes, they're offering pre-AP for all. And then the course audit administrator also needs to affirm each teacher as the teacher of record for that course. So there is a dependency. You as a teacher will go on and complete the course audit process. You don't need any special code or anything. You'll say, I'm teaching English 1, and you read through the requirements and you say, yes, I can agree to meet these requirements. And then your course audit administrator needs to approve that. They need to say, yes, this teacher is the teacher of record. And then you will automatically be granted access to pre-AP Classroom. Now, I know there's a lot of steps there, and so I want to make sure that you know the resources we have available to help guide you through the process. So if you follow the breadcrumb trail that's there, if you go to preap.org, and then on the top navigation menu, you'll see Start and Grow Pre-AP. Then navigate to Pre-AP Teachers and Pre-AP Course Audit. There you'll see the 1-page overview so you understand all of the steps. We also have a video walkthrough that guides you through the process of where to go, the steps that are required, and then also the steps that are required for your course audit administrator. And finally, there's the link right there on the page to go ahead and get started with course audit. So once you've completed course audit and you've been granted access to Pre-AP Classroom, we're going to have Zach walk you through what happens next and where you go. And while Zach is pulling that up, I do see a question in the Q&A, which I'll answer live. Is there a video available to guide our students through signing up for their College Board account? There is a PDF available, which is Zach is showing right here. And we actually are in the process of creating a video, and that will be posted on this page that Zach is showing right here. So it doesn't exist yet, but we are working on that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda. Hi, everyone. I can't see you, but I hope everyone is doing well. I work at the College Board here, and I help manage Pre-AP Classroom. So this is the digital platform that we'll be walking through today. So in Amanda's agenda, we're going to start off with just logging in. We'll create our classes, and then we'll talk through how to enable your students to join your class. After that, then we'll talk about how students can create their own College Board accounts. And then we'll actually get into Pre-AP Classroom. We're talking about accessing the instructional materials, assigning assessments and viewing assessment results, as well as the professional learning resources. So the page that I'm showing here, I hope everyone can see my screen. So the link that Amanda mentioned, so if you go to preap.collegeboard.org, and we're in the Start and Grow Pre-AP section. So there are actually two guides here. And ultimately they go over what I'll be talking through today. You know, we'll obviously be going more in depth, but these are nice resources that will allow you to remember how to go about these steps. So let's log in. So the link here that I'm going to click is logs into Pre-AP Classroom, and that takes us to myap.collegeboard.org. So this is going to be a great URL just to bookmark in your browser. Ultimately, this is the URL and this is the website that we'll go to log in. So once we get to this page, we see here there's a sign-in box. So I have some demo credentials for today. So once you put in your College Board account username and password, then you'll just simply click submit. Great. So this is our landing page. It's called AP Central. You see here at the top left. So this can be thought of as sort of the central hub and landing page that will allow us to A, get into Pre-AP Classroom, and B, provide us with some additional resources as well as creating our sections. So I'll kind of just walk us through the page a little bit here. So to access Pre-AP Classroom, there's sort of two ways to go about it. The drop down here at the top right, and you'll see that this demo account has all of our Pre-AP courses. I'm sure you will have less than this, but by clicking the course, that will allow you to access Pre-AP Classroom for that course. Alternatively, if you notice here off to the left, we have what I'll call our course cards. And so just simply clicking this Go to Pre-AP Classroom link within that course card will take you there as well. So those are the two ways to access Pre-AP Classroom. The second part of this page is off to the right. And these are some of our additional teacher resources. So you'll notice a couple links here that are Pre-AP specific. Number one is our community. So I'll just kind of open this up just quickly to show everyone. So our community will allow teachers to discuss strategies, share resources, connect with one another. This is sort of a space that allows teachers in our Pre-AP program to connect. So that's a nice resource to have, as well as just a Pre-AP overview link, and this will take us back to that College Board, preap.collegeboard.org site. So just a few resources here off to the right that are sort of just on this page for your benefit. So the third piece here is creating and viewing our sections. So you'll see here, this demo account actually has a few that have already been created. And what I'll do for this demo is we'll just use English 1 sort of as our example. But you'll see here, if I click the little plus sign here, these are test classes that I've created previously. If this is your first time in Pre-AP Classroom, you'll notice it'll just say add section. So you'll simply go to the course card. So we'll take English 1. And in order to create our classes, you'll just hit that plus sign as I mentioned, and then you'll click go to my class. So this is the my classes page, and this is where you'll be adding and creating your sections. So I'll just scroll down here to English 1, and you can see these are the ones that I've created previously, but simply to add a new section or class, we'll click the add section button here off to the right. And then you'll have a pop-up box, and there's really just 3 fields here to fill out. So the section name is number 1, so I'll just do test class 3. The course schedule, so there's 2 options, full year or semester. It does say second semester, but if you are just teaching first semester, definitely feel free to click that. We'll be working to hopefully correct that, but you can certainly just click second semester. And then simply indicate the start date here. So we'll just click I attest. And then finally, the maximum number of students in that section. So I'll just have it here at 40, and then we'll click create. All right, and you can see here that now this section has been created. So we can, that's the process ultimately to create all of the different sections for that course. So the next step is what we call join codes. So this is what you're going to be using to allow your students to join your class. So as you can see here, there's a 6 sort of letter and number code here. You can actually click the little box, the little arrow, and you can expand it. This will allow you to print it or copy and paste it. But ultimately, this is the code that you want to provide to your students. And that will allow your students then to join your class. So that is essentially the process for creating sections, for generating the join codes. Really, the next step now is to share that code with our students and then allow them to join our class. But before we get to that, students have to have their College Board accounts first. So that's what I would like to get to in this next section. So I'm going to actually change windows very quickly. And I hope everyone can see this window here. So as you can see, I'm back on myap.collegeboard.org. And so off to the right, there is a box that says don't have an account. So students will go to the same page. This is the same exact URL that we as a teacher went to, and we'll simply click create account. So once students get to this page, they will click the I'm a student box. And then we'll have a number of fields that need to be created in order to generate this account. One thing I'll note, and this is actually noted here at the top, this is the College Board account that your students will use in their high school career, whether it's for SAT, for AP, for pre-AP, obviously. So it will be great for students to, remember this username, remember this password, perhaps write it down, and as they'll be using this username moving forward. So I'll just kind of walk generally through the fields here. I do want to make sure we have enough time to walk through the pre-AP classroom functionality. So I'll just kind of walk through the fields that students will need to fill out and just sort of point out some important specific details here. So the first is just general information. So this will just be a first and last name, then the gender, and then finally the date of birth. So we'll just be the month, day, and year. I'll just sort of put some sample information here. And then a email address. It's important to note that obviously this will have to have the appropriate @ symbol and things of that nature. So email address, and then simply confirm the email address. The next field will be the high school graduation or the expected high school graduation date. So that will be the month and the year. And then ultimately the zip or postal code of the student. Where do you go to school? So this will actually auto-populate. So as you start typing, the student will see the high school pop up. So this is sort of just a test school here. So I'll just click that and that will populate where the student goes to school. So the next part is what I mentioned earlier, and this is the important username. So students definitely want to think through which one they would like to use. So they'll simply enter a username and then password. I think the note to keep in mind here is that there are some character specific requirements. So as you can see here, the username will need to be 6 through 15 characters, a mix of letters and numbers, and the password also has a few character requirements. So this is just important to keep a note as students are creating their usernames and passwords. Confirm password, again, just repeating the same password there to confirm it. Security question, I'm sure we've all seen these security questions in other forms elsewhere. So there's a number of different questions that can be used to remind the student of their password and their username. The next section is the personal information. So this includes a home address, city, state, and if applicable, but it's not needed, a cell phone. And then ultimately at the bottom here, there are some subscriptions. These can certainly be unchecked, but these are just about email notifications, opting in for resources, etc. And then finally, parent information. So if a parent is helping fill this out, parents can also indicate their name and email and can be included as part of this. So
Zach, I just want to jump in really quickly. There's a couple questions about whether students should use their personal emails or school emails and personal addresses and school addresses. And so just to clarify, the address information is for the student. So it should be their personal home address. Yep. The email address should be really that's a decision up to the student. If they track and monitor and use their school email address, they can certainly use that school email address. And if they change schools, they can just update their email address with their account.
Absolutely. Yep. Those are really great questions. So once all of those fields are filled out, and I think just for the sake of time, I won't necessarily fill out all the fields, but on the next page, you'll simply agree with the terms and conditions. It simply is a confirmation page that will show you just making sure this is your name and email. You'll simply indicate confirm, and then the student will have their account. Ultimately, that is the student account creation process. Once they do this, they'll have that student account, and we'll walk through very shortly what it looks like for the student to log in. I am going to turn it back to Amanda quickly because we actually do have a slightly different process for students who are under 13. So Amanda, I'll just turn it back to you and we can kind of talk through that process.
Absolutely. So because this is asking for personal information, the College Board is not able to create an account for a student who's under 13 without their parent consent. And so in that case, and this comes up most frequently for students who are enrolled in Algebra 1 or geometry courses and are taking them out of middle school. There are occasionally students in 9th grade who are under 13, but that's more rare. And so the process is that there is a form that parents need to complete and then email back to the College Board. And then when we receive that form back, we can, verify all the information and then create the account for the student. Right now, if you look at the preap.org website that we've referred to, and you can navigate to the coordinator manual, there are some directions there. We're in the process of creating an easily fillable form that can be emailed to parents directly, because we know many places are not going back in person. Typically, this would have been, a paper form that would go home with the student, the parent would fill it out, and then it would come back to the school and be coordinated by the pre-AP coordinator at your school site. And that coordinator would then send all of, scan all of those papers and send them to the College Board. But now what we're recommending is that the coordinator choose one teacher at the school who has all of the students who would be under 13. If it's a 9th grade, it's probably going to be English 1. And if it's in the middle school, it's probably going to be the math teachers. And they send the electric form, the electronic form, it's a spreadsheet, to the parent. The parent completes it. And there is one important piece where the email address that is listed in the spreadsheet must be the parent email address. That must be the email address that we receive the request from. That is a way for us to verify that the parent actually completed the form and not the student. And so the coordinator or the teacher would email the form to the parents would complete it, and then email it to the College Board and CC the teacher or the coordinator so that they can just track and know that the form was sent back to the College Board. And so that's the general process for students under 13. We will be adding this information to that same place that Zach showed you earlier, where the Start and Grow pre-AP teachers, and then pre-AP classroom. So the student video on creating their account, and then also all the information for creating an account for students under 13 will live in that place. That will be up within the next 2 weeks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda, for that detail. So I'm going to share my screen once again, and I'm back now on myap.collegeboard.org. And so just to kind of recap the process here, as a teacher, we created the sections, right? We generated those join codes. And then we had our students create their account. So now for students, how do they log in? So they also come back to the same page, myap.collegeboard.org. So they'll simply put in that username and password that they just created, and then click submit. Great, so now I'm in to a similar landing page, if you recall, as AP Central, slightly different. And so if I scroll down as the student, I can see a button that says join a course or exam. So this is ultimately how the students will join that section that you created. So once they click this button, they will simply enter that join code, right? So I forget the exact characters it was, but let's say it's these 6 characters. They'll click submit. And then as you can see, I did this earlier today. Once they submit that join code, you can see now that they have joined the class. So this student has joined the Zach Pre-AP teacher class. They'll simply click this link here, and the student is now in Pre-AP classroom.
And as it's loading up, I'm sorry, Zach, just one point. As it's loading up, so you'll notice that a lot of the URLs and some of the buttons say AP Classroom versus Pre-AP Classroom. It's the same platform if a student is AP versus pre-AP. The resources that appear on that platform are different, but that's why you'll see a lot of common naming between AP and pre-AP, because we're sharing the same DNA and sharing a lot of the same platform resources.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that clarification, Amanda.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of come back to the student a little bit towards the end, because I do want to walk us through the pre-AP classroom functionality for the teacher. So hopefully everyone can see my screen here. So as the teacher, we are back on that AP Central Landing Hub page, right? So let's actually go in now. So I'm going to click English 1, and I'm going to click Go to Pre-AP Class. Great, and here we are. So we went through the process, we created our sections, we logged in, our students have joined our class, and now we're in Pre-AP Classroom. So I'll kind of walk us through the different elements and functionality of this page. The first tab here is called Home. And so what this page is for is ultimately accessing our instructional resources, the various course guides. There are, as you can see here, we have Unit 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they are displayed across in a tab format as so. And within each unit, you'll notice that as I scroll down, we can see the unit outline. So this is English, so we can see here learning cycle 1, 2, 3. We have our learning checkpoints. We also have the performance task at the bottom. So a few other subjects will be, we'll go by key concept, a slightly different framework, but ultimately all of the courses will look very similar to this display here. So let me just kind of walk through a few things first. So at the unit level, you'll notice a number of resources across here. So if you simply click one of the links, it will open up the PDF. You can also download this. This is also opening up here in the browser for us. And you'll notice that now we have our Unit 1 instructional resource. In addition to that, there is a course overview. We have learning checkpoint sample questions, and I'll talk about Quill in a minute here. So this is ultimately where you'll find your unit level resources. Then down below is within each learning cycle or key concept. If you simply click the plus sign, you'll notice that this learning cycle has now expanded. And now it's broken down by each lesson. So we can actually go into each lesson and access a number of things that I'll talk through. So number one are the PDF resources. So as an example for lesson 1.1 here, I'll simply open up the teacher resource, and here's our PDF when we can access that lesson. Similarly, the student handouts, same idea. So we can open up all of our resources. We're able to view the outline and then go to the specific lessons. The second thing to point out here are what we're calling partner resources. So the College Board has actually partnered with a number of great organizations in order to offer wonderful resources for our teachers. So a few examples of this are vocabulary.com, as well as Quill. In geometry, we actually have Desmos. So we have a number of partner resources, and all of those will be displayed in this fashion. So I'll just kind of show everyone here what that looks like. When I click the Quill activity, I'll actually be directed to the quill.org/preap page. And as you can see here, we have Quill activities that are available to you. So that's one example. We can also look here at vocabulary.com. And so all of these, you can easily just click and access all of those resources. So all of those are at the lesson level. There is also just sort of a general link here to access the quill.org/preap. So this is a wonderful value for everyone here. So the second thing to point out, and really the second type of resource, is what's known as our distance learning resources. So a couple different areas here. Number one are some distance learning companion slides. So these are actually Google slides. So if I do make a copy, I now have access to, see if this works. Here we are. We have access to our distance learning slides here. So this is a great resource. In addition to this, I'm sorry, Amanda, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to add in for folks. So we have a whole suite of webinars on specifically how to use the distance learning companion slides. So if you missed those are in the process of being uploaded into the professional learning section of Pre-AP Classroom, and it walks you through everything you need to know about the distance learning companion slides.
So just another quick example, we have a passage audio here, and hopefully everyone can hear, but this is Bread
by Margaret Atwood.
So that's simply a link to SoundCloud. So ultimately we have our PDF resources, we have our partner resources, distance learning, really a ton of great resources within the outline. And then of course, once we're on to learning cycle 2, we can simply collapse this section and then move on to the next one, and then identify all of our resources there as well. Just a couple things I do want to point out. As I mentioned, most of the courses, they all look in this very similar fashion. There are a couple course-specific details that I do want to point out. So I'm going to go to world history. So for those teachers who might be teaching world history, you can actually identify the 2 different pathways. So you can see here that we're looking at all of the different pathways. You can also filter this by pathway 1, depending on which pathway you're teaching. That way we just have those units. In addition, we can filter by pathway 2 and only see those units. So as you can see, very similar. This is broken out by key concept. So I will go back to English. And I think the last thing that will be helpful to point out to everyone on this page is you'll notice there's sort of a little man icon here off to the right, or a little character, if you will. So for our student handouts, when you're ready to share this with your students, you can simply click this little icon and you'll see your classes here listed off to the left. You'll simply click one of the classes or all of them if you wish. You'll click save, and then you'll notice that this indicates that this resource has now been shared with your students. So ultimately what that does is when you share that with your students, they can now access that handout within their, and when I say they, I mean your students, within their version of Pre-AP Classroom. So that's pretty much covers this page. I think the last thing is just our course tab here. So these include all of our course level resources. So we have various crosswalks, we have instructional planning guides, as well as the course guide. So anything related to the course and not necessarily unit specific will ultimately be in that course tab. So the home tab is great for, this is ultimately where you'll be accessing all of your instructional resources and all of those partner and distance learning resources. So the next section I would like to talk through is our assessments. So you'll simply navigate to the assessments tab, and you'll notice here we have a list of all of our learning checkpoints. So this is not quite all of them yet, but they will be soon enough. So you'll notice here that we have the list of them. We can indicate the classes, and we'll talk through sort of when these start dates and due dates, and we'll talk through the details on them. So I'm going to open up the sample learning checkpoint. So this is just a sample here, but this will kind of walk us through what the functionality looks like and sort of how we can go about it. So off to the right, you'll click the actions button, and then you'll click preview quiz. So there's really 2 tabs once you click preview. Number 1 is what we're calling the assessment summary. And so what this is telling you is a little bit of an overview of the quiz or of the learning checkpoint. So you can see this is a very short one. Obviously, this is a sample. So you can see how many questions is in that learning checkpoint. You can identify the type of questions, whether it's multiple choice. We have a number of tech enhanced, so that'll indicate there as well. And then we can also indicate the sort of the learning objectives that are associated or measured by that question. So that will all be shown on the summary tab and give you a nice overview of what the learning checkpoint entails. The second tab that will be available is what we call view questions. Now, the important thing to note before I sort of show what this tab looks like, this will not be accessible until the actual learning checkpoint is in progress. Ultimately, this is intended to maintain the integrity of these questions. So you won't actually be able to look at these ahead of time, but once you administer it to your class that first time, you'll have access to viewing all of the questions. So ultimately, this is what the questions look like in our test player. So you can see here, this is just 2 questions. So this is actually exactly very, very similar to what students will see on their side when they're taking the learning checkpoint. So you can see here that they can navigate through the questions, they can use the arrows, they can actually bookmark questions, and there's a number of functionality off to the right as well. So as the teacher though, we can look at, by clicking this details pane, we can see the correct answer. We can also identify sort of the rationale at the bottom. We can click through and understand various explanations. Off to the right, we can see those learning objectives again that are based and measured by this question. So this will give a nice overview of what the learning checkpoint looks like and ultimately all of the questions. So that is what preview looks like. So when we're ready to assign our assessment, and we'll go and use, let's say, another one here, the The process will look as follows. So we're going to take Unit 1, Learning Checkpoint 2, just as our example, and I'll walk through what the steps look like there. So once we're ready to assign to our class, we'll go to Actions, and then we'll go to Assign Quiz. Once we click Assign Quiz, we'll see a pop-up here with a number of configurations and fields that you can set up. So the first field here is who we're assigning this to. So we can either indicate that we want to assign it to all our classes. We can assign it to just one class here, so you can select and deselect various classes. So if we want to assign it to our test class, we can do that here. The next field here is whether we want our students to see their results after they take the learning checkpoint. So there's really just two options here. We can indicate whether we want our students to see those results immediately after they're scored. Alternatively, we can indicate no, and that will prevent students from seeing those results. And we can always turn that on at a later point if we wish. The next couple fields are about the start date and the due date. So there's really two options here. If we're ready to assign this to our class, let's say right now, and we want our students to take the learning checkpoint, we can do that right now. We can simply select the current date and time. So that's would literally open it up to everyone now. Alternatively, we can set a future date. So if you want to have this assessment start, let's say next week on Monday, we can indicate the time, and that will simply indicate and ultimately open this learning checkpoint up to our students at that point. We can also indicate a due date. So this is when students would not be able to ultimately take the learning checkpoint or really enter or open it at that point. So we can just make sure there's a due date if we wish. Otherwise, we can just leave that blank. We can also add a timer if we wish. This is definitely and certainly not required, but ultimately, we can set a certain time limit. Now, it won't necessarily kick students out of the assessment once they're taking it, but it will, kind of allow them to continue, but they will be notified that they need to submit at that point. So if you have any questions on any of these configurations, there's these little exclamation points here that show, and they provide all of the detail and information if you need. So, obviously, if once you get into this and you need a little more clarification, those informational pop-ups will provide that. The last one here is something that's called Enable Lockdown Browser. This is certainly not required or necessary, but it is functionality that we do have, so it is available to you. Ultimately, what Lockdown Browser is that it allows students to, what really disallows students from browsing the internet. This is really a secure test-taking environment. So should you wish, you can certainly turn that on. The caveat here is that students would need to install that onto their device. Clicking a link here will take you to the instructions, and students have the availability to download that as well. So that is there, certainly not required by any means, but it is functionality that we do have. So once all of those fields are set up, you'll simply click Assign. Oh, send the due date earlier. There we go. Perfect. Cool. So now we've assigned it to our class, and I'll just kind of go back to kind of walk us through what that looks like now. So Unit 1, Learning Checkpoint 2, we've assigned it to our test class. You can see here the start date and the due date that I set. And now if we want to just look at the status, obviously our students have not taken this assessment yet, but once they begin, we'll be able to see the statuses. We'll be able to see here if John Lewis or John Test, these are our students, have started, have completed, exactly when they submitted. In fact, you can even, should you wish, see the live test session. So you can actually see while they're taking it. So this is a cool feature that is available as well. And then ultimately, should you need to adjust these configurations at any point, right? So let's say we want to adjust our start date. You can click any of these links here. It'll bring up that pop-up, and we can just simply adjust the start date. Let's say we want to start later. We can change the due date, etc. And all of that will be updated immediately. So this is just a little bit about tracking that progress and modifying those statuses. Cool. So the last piece of this, just to recap now, so we've assigned our assessment, right? We previewed it first. Now we're looking at the statuses. We've now assigned our assessment. What happens when our students complete it? What do the results look like? So the tab here, it's called Results. And we have here, and we'll look at our sample learning checkpoint again for what this looks like. So once you click into the report, this is our assessment report. So I'll walk through quickly because I know we're time sensitive today in the webinar. So there's really three main pages here. We have a summary, which will point out how your students performed. So we have the class average, as well as the percentage of our students that landed in each of our three performance categories. We have the highest and lowest performing questions off to the right. So we can see here, obviously these are sample, but we'll be able to see the questions that our students performed best, and then maybe those that are those questions that maybe students struggle with a little more. We can also go into overall points. And here we have a list of all of our students. And if I click the little arrow here, I can see all of my students, how they performed, which category they fall in, as well as their specific score. Of course, a 2-question assessment doesn't give us much, but you'll be able to see your specific students, how they performed on each question, how they performed overall. And then ultimately on the last tab here, we can look at the question by question results. So question 1, 60% of our students got it correct. We can actually see specifically which students got it correct and incorrect. So we have the list here. We can also look at some of the details and some of the learning objectives, again, associated with that question. And then finally, we can actually click into the question itself. And we can actually view, how many of our students answered each option. We can see the specific students that did that. We can see those rationales once again. So this really gives you a full view of the overall points on the learning checkpoint. We can see the specific questions. We can see how our specific students scored on each one. So this is really a robust report that really gives you all that detail and allows you to view, all of those different elements. Clicking on a student will actually bring you to the student's report. And so here we're looking at Diane Thompson. We can see her overall score, as well as, again, how Diane scored and how she answered that particular question. So I know that was a quick overview, but I wanted to make sure we covered everything here. I do want to show one more piece, and this is not showing in this platform, but I'm going to show a quick design. So this will actually be available later this month. And so I do want to make everyone aware of this piece of functionality. So on the summary tab here, we have a section which is called Using Assessments to Inform Instruction. And this is going to show us the various areas of focus, as well as the class performance on those particular areas of focus. We'll be able to look at which questions were measured by that area of focus, as well as really seeing the upcoming lessons or previous lessons that are measured by that area of focus. So ultimately, this section, as it's titled, is using this assessment to inform our instruction. We're really excited, and we hope that everyone else is excited about this functionality. And it really just adds value to the report that we already have currently.
Yeah, and Zach, I wanted to just add in for folks, that was a really quick overview of just the, sort of the features and functionality of the assessments and reporting, but we are having a webinar on September 3rd that will really dive deep into how to use the assessments and reporting for instruction. And I'll share some more information about that at the end of the webinar.
So that's really kind of the entire assessment and learning checkpoint flow, right? So we learned how to preview them, we learned how to assign them, and then we learned how to review those results. Just a couple quick notes before we move on to the professional learning section. So if you did teach last year in the 2019-2020 academic year, which based on the poll, I think was only 20%, so welcome all of our new teachers, you can look at the historical assessment results. So you would be able to see last year's results here if you click this drop down here. So that is available to us here. The other thing to know is just for our arts courses, as an example, like dance, music, etc., there are no learning checkpoints here. So all of that is within those performance assessments. So that's just kind of a quick note as well. Cool. So the last section is going, let me go back to English 1 here, is our professional learning. So I'll click on the link here. And ultimately, this is where our foundational module series, as well as the scoring modules for our performance tasks, are housed. So as you can see here, there's a couple different tabs. You can access all of the different modules. Once you click open, let's take the foundational as an example. You can click open the different sections. And if I click, so these have been completed, obviously, but I'll click review. And there's a number of different pieces and elements as part of these modules, right? There are videos, so I'll just play this quickly. So So we can move forward through that. There's also some checks for understanding. So we have various questions. Let me go back, actually. We can look at another, there we go. So yeah, there's multiple questions, there's videos. Ultimately, this is where you'll access those foundational modules. And as I mentioned, also the scoring modules for performance tasks. One quick thing to note here is that once those modules are completed, if you click the Get Certificate, you would be able to generate the certificate for that. So ultimately, what you'll do is you'll walk through each of the sections. It will tell you the estimated time to complete each one. Once you complete each section, it will be a little check mark, and then it will inform you if that section has been completed. So as you can see here, we did a nice job and we finished all of our foundational modules here. So any type of modules for professional learning will be housed in this section.
Yeah, and Zach, thanks so much for that. I wanted to add in just a few things. One is you do see the section that says pre-AP with Springboard foundational modules. If you are a Algebra 1 or Geometry with Statistics teacher or an English 1 or English 2 teacher that also uses the College Board Springboard program, you're going to want to go through those modules there because it'll talk about how to use pre-AP with Springboard. And so that'll be more relevant for you. The other piece is there will be a tab added here that says pre-AP webinars, and that's where all of the links for the webinars that we've been hosting this summer will live. We're in the process of doing some editing and some processing to those videos, and those will be updated shortly. Just wanted to make sure folks knew that. Great.
So that really takes care of the teacher version of Pre-AP Classroom. The final note that I'll make here is, should you have any issues, technical problems as you go along, there's a help contact form up at the top right. So within this section, as well as when you're back on that home or assessments tab, simply click the help icon. You can indicate the type of issues. So if it's about professional learning, you can indicate that, as well as share a screenshot. So if you do encounter any issues, please definitely send this in, send us a contact form, and we'll address it as soon as we can. So I think the final piece very quickly, and then I know you may want a few minutes for Q&A. So I'm just going to share our student version once again, because I do want to just show what it looks like for the student side. Cool. So if you recall, I had logged in previously with the student account. This is their version of Pre-AP Classroom. So as you can see, the unit outline is very, very similar. They'll see, the various lessons and the learning cycles. The one nuance is, if you recall, when we use that share button. So if teachers, as we're sharing with our students, a particular student handout, that will then show up down here. So that's sort of how all of that works. And then ultimately, they also have access to assessments. So this is where the assessments will live. Once, as teachers, we have unlocked and assigned it to our class, they'll be able to click begin and ultimately take the assessment. And we saw what that looked like a little earlier with the navigation and the bookmarking, et cetera. So ultimately, this is what the student side looks like. And I think it's obviously very helpful for us to see that as well. Results are very similar as well. So we have the results tab. Students can click on the learning checkpoint. And then ultimately, they can see how they performed. Right, so as a student here, this Zach student, apparently I'm not very good, got a 2 out of 14, and I'm in that developing category, as well as see, as the student, how I performed on each question. So I can see here, I only got 2 out of 14, and then clicking each question will bring me into that question and see, the correct answer, the rationale, and which one that I selected previously.
Zach, before you close out of the student experience, there was a question earlier about what it looks like when the the student resource or student reader is shared with the student. So if you could just go back to that homepage and just show what that might look like. Yeah,
absolutely. So the one nuance is this is actually being fixed today. It's a very minor issue. but just to hopefully everyone can imagine this, it will literally just show up off to the right here. So if you recall from the teacher side, let me just kind of share us back again. Great, unfortunately, things happen, right?
That's right.
So let me bring us back here. Cool. So this is the teacher side once again. So Again, that share icon is off to the right. And so it will look identical to this for the student, right? So they'll see lesson 1.1. They obviously won't see the teacher resource, but once we click share in this format, they will then see the student handout just like this. There will be a link off to the right. So no real sort of design difference for the student side to see that.
Yeah, and there was part of the question was students then can download that handout if they want to. There were a few questions earlier about, are these handouts editable? These are PDFs, so they are not editable in and of themselves. There are quite a few third-party applications that will allow a student to annotate and, make markings on a PDF, but the PDFs themselves are not editable PDFs.
Exactly right. Cool. So I think really that covers the full experience. I know we have about 9 minutes or so, so I'm going to stop sharing. I want to thank everyone so much. I know I can't see you, but I hope everyone's doing well. And I hope this was super informative from the teacher side, how to log in, how to create accounts, how ultimately to review results. And as Amanda mentioned, from a content perspective, we do have other webinars and we have an assessment one coming up as well. So Amanda, maybe I'll turn it back to you, and I want to thank everyone again.
Great. Yeah, so right now I'm not seeing folks any questions in the Q&A, so I'll take just a moment as folks maybe have an opportunity to type in. And I want to make sure everybody knows that we do have a survey form that I just put into the chat, and it'll also be emailed to you. But it's a short survey just to provide us some feedback on this session, and then also let us know what else would be helpful to you in terms of support for this year. So, this session was actually added because of the feedback from earlier attendees in webinars. And so we really do take that information very seriously and request that you complete the survey. It'll really help us. The other thing that I do want to do, and give me just a moment as I share, we do have a few additional webinars coming up. And Zach, if you can just confirm that you're seeing the right screen here with the additional learning opportunities, perfect.
Yep.
So we have one more webinar, which I mentioned earlier, which is focused on using assessments and reporting for instruction. That'll be led by our assessment team. You'll notice that we are hosting it in the evening because we know that many folks will be back to school at that point. And if you can't make it, you can sign up for it, regardless of whether you can attend in person, and you'll receive the recording of that webinar within 48 hours. The second element that I want to make sure you know about in terms of additional learning opportunities are the Virtual Foundations cohorts. So this summer, we were not able to meet in person, but we did host a series of Virtual Foundation cohorts, and I did not change the title there. My apologies. You're seeing where it says Virtual Foundations cohorts and then it says using pre-AP assessments. It's a typo on the slide. We have cohorts for each course beginning on August 24th. They're meeting Mondays and Thursdays from 8 to 9:30 p.m. And if you follow these links here, you'll be able to register for those sessions. So I just want to make sure folks know that we are continuing to really try to support you and give you, learning opportunities going into the school year. The other thing that I do just want to make sure everyone sees is our email address. So as you're going through, if you have questions, please email us at preap@collegeboard.org so that we can help you with whatever issue you're having. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now. And I also will go ahead and type in the direct link if anyone wants to register either for the webinar or the Virtual Foundations cohorts. You can go ahead and click the link that I just dropped into the chat. So you can register either for the Virtual Foundations cohorts there or the Using Assessment for Instruction webinar in the link that I just dropped in. Now, there is a question here that we may need to follow up on. There's a question about a program such as an immersive reader that can check points, that checkpoints can be read to students or have oral administration modifications. So I think this is asking about in the learning checkpoints, if there's a way for the questions to be read aloud to students if they have an IEP. So Zach, do you happen to know that off the top of your head? And if not, Brooke will take this offline and email back to you.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we can take this offline. I just want to, we can check offline. So we'll definitely get back to that question. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent, Brooke. We'll email you shortly. Excellent. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. I want to thank everybody who attended. We really appreciate your time and your attention today. You will receive an email with both the survey and the video link within the next 48 hours. And if you have any other questions, please email us at preap@collegeboard.org. Thank you so much, and thank you, Zach, for taking the time today.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.